Welcome. My name is Aaron Birkby, and I'm one of the entrepreneurs in residence in the QT entrepreneurship team. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about minimum viable products, explaining what an MVP is, but also explaining why we need them. And in this particular context, I'm really focused around MVPs as a tool for validation. So rather than actually building the first version of your product to go to market, I'll actually be framing this a little bit more as the first version of something to put in front of a customer to validate that your great idea is indeed great. I'll also be sharing some techniques and tools that are available, most of them free, that will enable you to build an MVP even if you don't have technical skills. So starting off with, what is an MVP? So MVP stands for minimum viable product. It is the smallest thing you can put in front of a customer to validate demand. Usually when we talk about MVP, it's a product that you can actually almost sell. You might not sell it, but you have the potential to sell it. But as I was saying in the introduction, this session today, I'm really focused on validation. So think of this as the minimum value proposition test. It's another way of framing it, but think about what's the smallest thing you can do rather than build to actually test and validate demand for your new product or service. And why do we need it? So the reason we need an MVP is that we don't want to make the mistake of building our big final solution and finding out that no one actually wants it. And this is the problem with most people who launch new ideas, is they do something we call waterfall development, which is where you go from the idea, you go straight into designing out your solution, straight then into building it. And you build the full bells and whistles final product before actually putting it in the hands of a customer, only to then find out that no one actually wants it. And that's depicted on this slide on the left here, where someone has gone to great expense, or not just someone, but likely a team, to design a park that looks beautiful. Its design is fantastic, but ultimately the user just wanted to get from A to B. They don't care for the rest of what was built. Had they done a minimum viable product, such as just laying grass and seeing where the grass was worn down and then laying the footpaths, they would have discovered exactly what the users want. And the reason this is an issue, or the reason this is even more challenging, is the fact that what our customers, our users, what people say and think is very different to what they actually do. So we might do validation in the form of surveys, desktop research, and find out what people think. We might even do some face-to-face interviews and find out what people say. But when it actually comes time for someone to invest, to take action, to give you their time, or perhaps actually make payments and cash, you'll find that the percentage of those that follow through with action will be a fraction, a very small fraction of those who originally expressed an interest in your idea. In other words, there's a big disparity between what people think, what people say, and what they actually do. And the purpose of an MVP is to get people to take action. So this green circle here, what do people do? An MVP in the context of validation is something that we can build, something that we can create, something that we can give to someone to test their actual action. What will they do when they're presented with our product or service? Now, the thing about an MVP is, as you can see at the top, we don't just build a small part of it that serves no purpose. So if we were in the business of building cars, for example, there'd be no point just making a wheel because that's not usable. But if we made a skateboard and started with that, the user can still get from A to B on a skateboard. And then we could evolve that into a scooter before evolving it into a bicycle, into a motorbike, and then into a car. Now, this is obviously not a great example, but it gives you the concept that an MVP has to be usable. And when we talk about it, even in the validation context, it has to in some way give a meaningful insight. So the progression of MVPs for validation. So this is where we're looking at how do we use an MVP as a tool to support us through validation. And here's some examples on the screen of how we can go through this process, starting with Facebook ads and then moving into emails, PDF brochures, registration pages, crowdfunding campaigns, having manual concierge services, Wizard of Oz, wireframes. All of these are different techniques that we can use to build MVPs. And I'm going to be going through them in a lot of detail, but immediately one thing that comes straight to mind when I talk to many entrepreneurs and founders is, rather than build anything at all, just go and put up a couple $100 on Facebook ads. Put up a dozen different Facebook ads targeting different demographics with different wording and see if anyone clicks on them. Before you've built a thing, let's validate if someone will take the action, if they will actually do something like clicking on your ad. And then you could have a PDF brochure. Many businesses I've launched have just been with a brochure, just a flyer. I've literally emailed a brochure of a product or service that doesn't even exist yet to a business to see if they would buy it. And only after they agreed to purchase it would I then go and build the actual product or service. And this is the way that many crowdfunding campaigns work. You can actually put up a campaign pre-selling a new product or service, getting people to pre-purchase it on the basis that they'll get it in the future after you build it. And then I'll go through some manual techniques about how you yourself can actually be the first version of your product. And that's really demonstrated here. So in this case, I would call this a Wizard of Oz technique. So here we have a ticketing machine within a train station. To the end user, it looks very much like a real machine. They're expecting a computer to be in there, processing the ticket. But the reality is it's just a person, doing that hamster wheel process, doing all the things in a very unscalable way, just purely manually. We call this the Wizard of Oz because it's taken from the movie Wizard of Oz, where the wizard is behind the curtain and it's made out to be this great, amazing, all-knowing wizard, but it's really just a human being just peddling and making things look amazing. This is the Wizard of Oz technique. Manual concierge is a little bit different. Manual concierge is where you just openly admit that you are doing this, just like a concierge in a hotel. You just be the first version of your product and just manually do it yourself. And I encourage you, that's the best MVP you can launch with, is just you actually being the product or service. Without building any tech, without doing anything at all, how can you go and get a customer and service them immediately? How can you go out and actually connect people? So for example, if your idea was a two-sided marketplace to connect chefs who are having days off or in their downtime with people who love chef quality food delivered to their homes, and you want to basically create a platform or a marketplace where you can book a chef to come to your house, then the best way to do that isn't to build a platform. It's not to build an app. It's not to build a website, but you literally go out and door knock and find some chefs who are happy to cook in people's homes, and then go and find and door knock on houses to find people who want a chef to cook in their house. And then you literally just exchange their phone numbers, maybe take the payment, take a commission off the top. You're validating your business without ever having to write a line of code. And this is a really important way of looking at MVPs. We should only build the product when it's time to automate the process we are already doing. So if we're doing something manually, the reason we build the tech is to make what we're doing in this manual way much easier. It's to simplify the process so that we can scale and do more of it faster. Now, that's not true for all things. We won't be able to do that for all solutions or all of our ideas or products or services. But if you have that lens, if you approach it with that perspective, then it should cause you to ideate and come up with ways that you could literally start a business tonight without ever building anything. You don't need a line of code. You need a customer, and you need to service that customer. Now I'm going to share some different tools that you can use to build an MVP. And this might sound a bit bizarre to mention, building an MVP with what is essentially Google Suite. So Google Sheets, Google Docs, Google Slides. But there have been businesses that just launched literally with these services. And an example of that is Airtree Ventures. So Airtree Ventures had an idea. They were looking at the problem of, early stage startups struggling to be connected with the right investors. How does a startup founder know the right type of investor who's interested in their type of company, interested in their stage of company, but is also reviewed? How do you know that the investor you're talking to is actually credible and that they will add value to your company? So Airtree could have gone out and created an app. In fact, many instances around the world, that's exactly how this problem has been solved, is through apps, through websites, through platforms. But Airtree, practicing the true spirit of an MVP, instead went about this in a very different way. They simply created a Google Sheet. They shared it on social media and invited anyone to list an investor that they had had in their company, or for investors to add themselves to the list. And this list has now been running for well over 18 months. It's publicly available. All of you can look it up and find it. And what it has become is a directory of Australian investors, both angel investors, early seed round investors, through to later stage institutional funds and venture capital. But again, they approached it from this minimum viable product perspective. What's the smallest thing we could do to launch this immediately and solve this problem? Even though they might never intend to monetize this, they may never turn this into an app. They've solved the problem. We can also do this with tools like different form creation tools. So when we were talking in the separate validation video, and if you haven't watched the validation video, I encourage you to watch it. Pause this one now and go and seek that one out. But there are tools available that allow you to create forms, which you can use for surveys, but you can also use them as registration forms. People can pre-sign up to your product. They might be pre-signing up to be notified in the future of when your product is launched. But you can use services such as Typeform, Google Forms, Zoho, SurveyMonkey, there's many others, which will allow you to create forms for free or pay to have more advanced features in your forms. Some of these forms also integrate with payment solutions. So for example, Typeform will integrate with Stripe, and you can actually have a full shopping cart process where people can sign up for your product or service and actually pay for it with a credit card, all through a free Typeform. You'll end up with a service that you can, a link that you can actually send out on your social media or via direct email campaigns. Now, personally, along with Peter Ellis, we've launched multiple businesses just by using a Typeform that's linked to a Stripe credit card payment. We launched Peak Persona, which is a human acceleration program helping build high growth humans. They're all online programs, but the way we launched it was to create a registration form with a credit card payment gateway attached to it. And it was only after we had 65 people sign up that we actually went ahead and designed and developed the program. Now, many of you might not be that great at graphic design, but you don't have to be. There's actually a heap of platforms available to help you come up with your business name, to help you design your logo, to help you design business cards, to help you design your digital advertising collateral, maybe a PDF, slide decks, you name it. One great Aussie startup is called 99 Designs. And with 99 Designs, you can go online and you can actually create a project. You can create a challenge. So for example, if you want a new logo, you put a premium, like basically a prize, a cash prize award associated with that contest. And then designers from around the world will lodge their designs and compete for them to be awarded and for you to select a logo. And what that means is, rather than paying a traditional design agency to create one logo for you, you're now able to put some money up as a prize and have thousands of designers around the world submit their logo ideas to you. That's an example of a paid version, but there's lots of free ones too. Canva is a great Australian unicorn, meaning it's a great Australian startup that is now worth over $1 billion. Canva allows you to go online and create almost any sort of digital content, whether it's slide decks, logos, branding items, images for your social media campaigns from Instagram to Twitter to banner heads for your YouTube channel. You name it, you can design it in Canva. There's also services like Naming Force. There's lots of free logo ones. And what these will all do is help you come up with a business name. Now, in the early stages of your business, where you're at right now, the name is actually less relevant than making sure you're validating your idea. So what these services enable you to do is quickly get a logo, quickly get a name, quickly get a business card, quickly get some graphic design done so that you can maintain momentum on what matters, which is interacting with a potential customer to validate demand. In the future, you can rebrand. And many startups have launched in this way. When Airbnb first started, they were actually a couch surfing business. Their logo has undergone many iterations of change, but they started with just very simple, let's move fast, let's get a design done and keep going and worry about the amazing, awesome logo design and correcting our name later once we know exactly what we're doing in the market. There's also free tools for mailing list management. So this is where you want to manage, maybe it's signups to a newsletter. Maybe it's managing your database of customers who are paying for your product. Maybe it's people who are pre-registering to purchase. Maybe it's just managing your survey data. But you can use services like Vision 6 or MailChimp. Many of you might be familiar with MailChimp. It's an email management platform and contact management platform. Vision 6 is a great Brisbane-based startup that's competing with MailChimp, doing incredibly well globally. So my personal bias would be to support the Aussie one with Vision 6, founded by a fantastic founder here locally. But both of them enable you to send regular newsletter updates to perhaps a growing audience of people who are interested in the future of your business, interested in purchasing your product in the future. You can also use them for investor updates or for key partner updates, EDMs, all sorts of email campaigns and marketing strategies. Great tools for managing contacts. At some point, you'll want to build a website. Now, rather than going out and getting a design agency or web development agency to build you an expensive site, you can start off with a free one. Services such as Wix, LaunchRock, Strikingly allow you to very quickly build a landing page for your business without needing any technical skills. They operate pretty much on drag and drop. So you'll pick from a template, you'll type in the text for your business name and what you do, be able to drag in photos and other content, and end up very quickly within the space of a couple of hours with your own website launching your business. Explainer videos are a great example of using this MVP concept to build something to validate demand. And you can actually create cartoon versions of explainer videos. You can also go and obviously film your own little explainer video and edit it together. But you can also outsource these through Freelancer or through services such as Fiverr, where videographers around the world or cartoonists and animation experts can actually create content for you. But a great example of this is Dropbox. So when Dropbox launched, they actually launched with an explainer video. So the way that they actually first tested demand was to create a video which was extremely rough, but it explained how Dropbox works. And then people who were interested could pre-sign up for the product for when it was released. But for you, you could use this exact strategy before you've built anything, before you've written a line of code, before you've gone into any thought process of what to build almost. You could do an explainer video and then actually share that out on social media and see how many times it gets watched, how many people watch it till the end, and link with the video a pre-registration form using something like Typeform where people can pre-sign up. It's a great way to launch a business without having the overhead of actually waiting for a product to be built. In terms of when it is time to accept payments, there's a lot of payment gateways that you can use, but here's two that you might be familiar with. PayPal, which easily integrates for accepting payments from people like credit card payments or bank transfer payments. If you don't, it can integrate with web services, it can integrate into apps, but can also be used as a standalone product. Another great one is Stripe. Stripe is fantastic for integration into a number of platforms. I mentioned it integrates with Typeform, but you can actually just easily get this to work with other services. And then there's things like Square. So if you are taking payments in the real physical world, you can actually get a payment processing system which works through your phone through Square. And these are all methods that you can use right now to start taking payments. Now, for those of you who are looking to build an app, one way to actually prototype something and build an MVP is not to build the final app, but instead to design some mock-up screens of what the app might look like, in other words, wireframing, and then actually show them on our phone. So these services allow you to make what looks like an app. It'll even potentially function like an app where you can designate, if I touch on this part of the screen, which you know is a button or it looks like a button, it'll automatically go to another screen. But really, these are just pictures. And as you click on each part, it's just taking you to another picture. So it's a very easy way to rapidly prototype and almost like create an app without it actually having any functionality. It's just purely to demonstrate and put in front of someone. Wireframing tools, they're popular online. Here's just an example of a couple of them: InDesign, Fluid, and Pop. But there's many more. Some of these allow you to design them collaboratively with other team members, and some are just single users. But in some are wireframe. You could literally just draw these on a piece of paper and take a photo of them, have them on your phone, and then go and walk up to people and demonstrate it to get real-time feedback. Now, if you do need a database for storing data sets, perhaps you're collecting information, perhaps part of your business model is around selling information, for example, then there's a lot of databases that you can sign up to very quickly, which integrate quite easily. So Airtable is a great example of one of the more modern ones. You can use it as a CRM system. You can use it to store any sort of data. Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services actually give credits to startups if you're participating through particular programs. They're great for if you want to build for scale. So if you want to store your data sets in a database online in the cloud and actually have it scale in the future. Chatbots are emerging as a great way to build an interactive service with people. In fact, many businesses are launching just purely as a chatbot service. Again, there's free tools that enable you to build chatbots. A chatbot is where basically you type into a messenger style window and have a conversation. It comes across as if you're having a conversation with a human, but you're actually talking to a machine. ManyFuel, Chatfuel, BotNation AI are just examples of some of the platforms that are available for you to create chatbots. Now, Wobot is an example of a startup that used a chatbot actually as their entire platform. Wobot is a psychological counseling service. So for anyone who's experiencing maybe a downturn in their mood, maybe feeling a bit anxious, maybe feeling a bit sad, they can actually open up Wobot and start chatting. And the studies actually show that this is a really great way of dealing with mental health. It might sound odd that in those moments, surely you want to talk to another human and not a computer. But through what they've found through designing their chatbot is that people have a conversation with a computer, they can say things much more honestly and openly, and they have that chance to purge emotions, which they might not otherwise have in an ordinary conversation. Then we can start moving to automation. Zapier is a fantastic tool that allows you to connect hundreds of different types of software together so that they automatically trigger fire when one thing happens on one into another. So for example, using Zapier, you could integrate it with your Gmail account. So anytime you receive an email that has an attachment, it automatically downloads that attachment to your Dropbox account. And that could also automatically add the sender's details into a Google Sheet. It could also, anytime that file then lands in Dropbox, it could automatically email it to certain team members to take action on, or it could automatically take a screenshot of something or generate a PDF. All of these things you can program to happen using Zapier without needing any technical skills. So many businesses have actually launched the first prototype of their product, their first MVP, using Zapier without needing any technical skill at all. Now, if you are looking for something like machine learning, I mean, often we think, do we need some AI or machine learning to really build out the smarts behind what we do? And obviously that requires an incredible skill set and ability to do that. But it turns out, again, there's services online where you can actually move your data, put your data or perhaps your images through an online processing tool and actually use their open source or their API service as a way to use machine learning without having to actually develop your own algorithms or actually have your own capability in-house. And then we move into physical prototypes. So often we think that physical prototypes are much harder than software, but in reality, we can still use a lot of the same types of hacks and principles. There are many companies that use cardboard prototypes or clay prototypes as the very first versions of their products to put in front of people to test. Dyson, you can see in the middle here, has actually created cardboard mock-ups of their vacuum cleaners, and they use them to test, but they also use them to put in front of people to see how people interact with them. On the right here, you can see a toaster, again, mocked up purely in cardboard. And on the left, we can see Google Cardboard. So Google actually launched this cardboard version of an augmented reality technology as a product. They actually sell this. It comes as a flat sheet of cardboard that you can fold up. It has a lens in it. You insert your smartphone, and suddenly you have an augmented reality system. But again, it goes to show that without having to build any key tech, without having to build a physical product, there are still ways to get something in the hands of a customer to see if they'll use it or want it. Then we can move into 3D printing. So moving on from cardboard, we can actually start printing in plastics, but even now starting to print in metals, fabrics, and other materials. 3D printers are commonly available inside universities, inside schools, particularly also in libraries. You can actually buy them for your home. How much you spend will determine the quality and the resolution of the prints that you get. But this is another great way to physically prototype something if it's a physical product. So if you need to put a physical product into the hands of someone to test and validate, going to someone who has a 3D printer and asking them to print it might be a great way for you to do something relatively inexpensively. And then electronic prototypes. Sometimes we're building something that might be an IoT device, or it might involve electronics. And often we think, we need to outsource these to an electrical engineer. But in the very first case, we may be able to prototype something using an Arduino board or a Raspberry Pi. Arduino and Raspberry Pis are devices that function like computers. And online, there's a ton of free tutorials. There's a lot of free content. And you can go and buy these parts quite readily at a store like Jaycar here in Australia to allow you to build something and prototype something without needing too much technical knowledge. You can upskill pretty quickly. So examples of this could be sensors. Maybe you want to build a floodwater sensor. Maybe you want to build a light sensor. And maybe you want to build something that's automating a process. Personally, I've used this to launch an IoT solution that retrofit into coin-operated vending machines and amusement rides, particularly looking at the amusement ride sector around detecting motion, gearbox failure, coin jams, temperatures of systems, but also enabling credit card payments. I actually built the first prototype of that system using Arduinos, and then actually built that through to exit and acquisition while never having advanced that far beyond the Arduino platform. And then one of the final techniques is leveraging labor. So you can actually automate a lot of things by outsourcing them. It's a different way of thinking about building your MVP, but actually outsourcing your labor component can be a really effective way to build something as a business. You can do this through Freelancer, Airtasker, Fiverr. There's a number of other platforms where basically you can post jobs and have people complete them. Now, this could be for research purposes. This could be for data processing or data sourcing. It could be for image processing, image recognition. A lot of the things that we think we need to go and build tech for, we can start off by building as labor-intensive solutions and later build the tech to automate them. Crowdfunding is a fantastic way to launch a new idea, particularly if it's a physical product. What you can do is actually create an example of what your product might look like. You can describe it, and you can create perks. So people buying early into a crowdfunding campaign get some sort of benefit by being an early backer. You set the amount of money that you want to raise for your crowdfunding campaign and the time in which you need to raise it by. And if that funding goal is successful, then that money is released to you. You then go and build the products and then ship them to the customers in the future. It's basically like people pre-buying your product or service. Now, the thing about crowdfunding campaigns is it's quite easy to think it's very easy, right? Like it's quite easy to set up the web page. It's quite easy to start the campaign. But there's actually an entire science and process around successful crowdfunding campaigns. If you get it right, you might be able to do what Pebble has done. So Pebble actually has the goal of, set the record for raising 20.4 million US dollars during their campaign. They raised 1 million within the first 49 minutes, 10 million within the first 2 days. Most campaigns, though, in fact, a lot of campaigns, rather than most, don't get funded. And that's because they don't have a successful or strategy for PR and for actually activating their campaign. So don't make the mistake of just rushing into a crowdfunding campaign. There's certain nuances to it that you need to understand. It's a process to prepare, but it is a great way for launching something new into the market. So that's the session on minimal viable product. I hope that what we've covered has inspired you to think a little bit differently about how you can launch. Remember, this is in the context of validation. So I explained why this is important, starting with the fact that you want to build the smallest thing possible to go out and learn, to go and test and prove and validate. To understand exactly what the ultimate product should look like, we first have to start with the smallest possible thing to put in front of them. And in the validation context, I explained that that might take the form simply of a PDF, of a brochure. It might take the form of a registration page. Don't make the mistake of thinking you need to build the final product. This is all about building the smallest thing possible to put in front of someone to validate demand. And I shared with you a heap of free tools and techniques online that you can use to create something without having to be technical. Even if you don't have the technical knowledge, there's a ton of free stuff and some of it paid that you can use to actually build something. But ultimately, I encourage you to think about what can you do where you are the MVP? What is the opportunity for you to go and start a business without building any product whatsoever, just by you performing the transaction for someone? How can you be of service as a manual concierge or the Wizard of Oz and actually deliver service and value and actually extract a value back from that? My name's Aaron Berkby. If I can assist you at all in your endeavors, please do reach out. Otherwise, I hope this session has been useful.